talk a lot about prayer today. And I'm sorry, but my iPad decided that it wanted to go back to the home screen. So give me just one brief minute while I jump in and find where I'm at in. Okay, can I get some do? There it is, Nehemiah. It's in alphabetical order, Mike. Okay, I'm gonna share this morning out of Nehemiah, and the first thing that I'm gonna do is read as soon as I get to the right document. Terribly sorry about this. I am having a hard time. Actually, I can't even find what I'm looking for, so I might just have to go to the old-fashioned Bible that the Gideons give away. I found it. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and, Ashton, you are just so good. Thank you for all your help. We're going to read in Nehemiah today, and I'm going to start out in the scripture, and then we're going to go and I'm going to give you some background to the book of Nehemiah. And then there's going to be an ask. And as I think about what the Gideons came today and shared that they're looking for funds and for resources and for prayer, and I support that 100%. Even though today I'm going to ask you for something else. But is what I want to say to you guys is that no matter what's being asked up here, there's a lot of needs in this world. I want you guys to always pray about what it is that God wants you to do. Because we've asked for money for our teens, we've asked for money for our youth, for our kids, we've asked for money for missionaries, Gideons, and we have building needs as well. And all of these things are asked, and I want you to know that never do I want you to feel like that the church is like just putting this repressive thing on you, that they're always asking for something, and I take that very seriously. In fact, as I go into Nehemiah today, no matter what I'm say up here today, is what I want you to hear is the Word of God, because I am going to preach the Word of God. I'm also going to ask for something, but I don't want to get those two things mixed up. And actually, I prayed and fasted for 2 months before I came to you today with this message. And when I say I fasted, sometimes people think fasting, I didn't go hungry for 2 months. I intermittently fasted different things. Sometimes it was coffee. Sometimes it was social media. Sometimes it's certain foods or certain meals. A lot of times I do no breakfast, no lunch. The only thing I eat is dinner. And sometimes I go no food or anything all day long. And there's all kinds of different ways to fast. And Nehemiah talks about praying and fasting today. And I want that to be your focus today more than anything else. There is an ask, but I don't want you to worry about the ask. What I want you to worry about is what's God saying in His Word. Right, Dennis? In His Word. So, Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. It says, the word of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year. While I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile and also about Jerusalem. And I want you to notice something. I underlined a word. It says questioned. He was seeking to find out how things were. Guys, sometimes we should be questioning, like, how are you doing? Or how is the church that I grew up in doing? Or how is your family doing? Or, hey, I know you've been sick. Are you feeling better? We should question. We should not just sit in our own little world and worry about ourselves. We should question and worry about what's going, not worry, but have concern for what's going on in other people's lives, right? So he questions them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile and also about Jerusalem. They said to me, those who survived the exile are back in the province, are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. When I heard these things, and here's what I want you guys to really hear, is verse 4. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. And then from here, he's going to go in and he's going to start praying. And he's going to kind of show you what he prayed about for this 4 months. And there's this 4-month period of time. But before I get going on that, is what I want to say really quick. Because did you notice we had a brother that came down and prayed today? Oftentimes we have people that come down and pray, and there's no altars there right now. And we want to change that. And we had some beautiful altars that Mark Watt built, and for whatever reason they're not working out. But what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the altars that we had. You guys, some people have been here a long time. We used to have these two big, huge altars, and we've actually hauled them over to Amy and Lyle Edwards' house. And Lyle's been sanding on them and working on them. And Amy wanted to invite anybody that wants to come next Saturday to her house and help her sand them down and finish sand them. And then we're going to refinish them and put them back in here in the sanctuary so that people can come and pray and bring their prayers and concerns to the Lord. And that's something that we're looking forward to. And Amy's asking for help next Saturday. If you want to know where that is, check out our website and find the Firewood Ministry. And that has their address because that's where we do firewood ministry as well. It's on the same day. We're doing firewood and the prayer altars. So if you want to come and help out with either one of those, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or even a youth, you can come and help out. So thinking about prayer, I think prayer needs to be really, really important in our church. And Amy believes that too. That's why she's like, I want those altars back in here. And I said, I want them too, but somebody needs to sand them down and refinish them. And she says, sign me up because prayer is that important. So I am thankful for that, and we also meet on Mondays for prayer. If anybody ever wants to come at 6:30, and Amy meets with women only at the Prairie House at 6:30 on Tuesdays, 6 o'clock on Tuesdays. So if anybody wants to be involved in prayer in this church, there's lots of opportunity. Not only that, you can be praying every single day on your own, right? So let me get to some of the background to Nehemiah. I just read something. You're like, I don't even know what's going on. Like, what was happening? Why was Nehemiah praying this? Why was there all this trouble in Jerusalem? Why are the walls burned down? All that stuff. And you're wondering, what is going on? Leading up to Nehemiah, we need to understand that Babylon conquered Israel in 586 BC. So Babylon comes along and conquers Israel. It was promised by God that it would happen if they didn't follow his decrees, if they didn't follow his law, if they put other gods before the one and only God, that these bad things would happen. And their city and their country is overtaken by Babylon. And then Persia conquered Babylon in 539 BC. That's 47 years later. And the thing about it is when Babylon took them over, they took them all off into exile. They hauled them off into another land, into the land of the Babylons, and they took all the best and strongest people and put them into different places there to do work, and they left people that weren't as skilled and weren't as smart and weren't as rich, and they kept them back in Jerusalem, and Nehemiah is concerned. But then Persia comes and takes over Babylon, which was a good thing for Israel, because Persia wasn't as hard on the people that were in slavery to them, and they actually let a lot of them go home to their land that they came from and to rebuild in their hometown. So sometime around 538 BC, which is just a year or so after this takeover where the Persians took over, the exiles returned to Jerusalem and completed the rebuilding of the temple in 516 BC. And that was done by Zerubbabel, and you can find that in Ezra chapter 1 through 6. That name means planted in Babylon. So I think that's important, what that name means, planted in Babylon, is because these people, you're talking about Zerubbabel, you're talking about Ezra, you're talking about Nehemiah, all three of those people, they didn't grow up in Israel. They grew up in captivity. Like, they began their life in captivity. And when Nehemiah is saying, man, my heart's broken, you got to remember, he never even lived in Jerusalem. That wasn't where he grew up. He grew up in slavery, basically. However, Nehemiah was in a pretty good spot. He was a taster anyway for the king. What's it called? Wine. Anyway, it's at the end of the chapter 1. He tasted the king's food. He tasted the king's wine. He made sure that the king didn't get poisoned. That's what he did. But Ezra and Nehemiah were originally the same book in the original Hebrew Bible. So originally it was one book. We've separated it to make it easier for reading and easier to digest. And the book is the history of Nehemiah's journey to Jerusalem and the work led to rebuild the wall. Nehemiah received news that the wall that protects Jerusalem had not been repaired. So he receives this news that the wall had not been repaired. Yes, they had rebuilt the temple, but the wall was still in shambles. Nehemiah is deeply moved and saddened by this news. And I think that's important to understand because he didn't even live there. That's not like, I can imagine like if the home that I grew up in, I found out it was destroyed, I'd be like, oh man, that's sad. Especially if, I have like thousands and millions of people that live there with me. And in this circumstance, he didn't even grow up there. All he knows is the history of his people. Nehemiah bravely asks the Persian king for permission to fix the wall and provide safety and resources. And you find that in Nehemiah chapter 2, and we'll talk more about it. Even though the construction was stopped by the king previously with Zerubbabel, this king, once again, by God's favor, permits Nehemiah to continue the work. And this is 71 years later. So this king gave him permission to go back and rebuild, and then they put a stop to it, and then and say, man, you guys, actually they say, did you guys know that this country, like, they used to be a stronghold, and they are a problem. If they get to be a stronghold again, they'll be a problem for us. So they stopped the construction. And now Nehemiah, heartbroken that the wall is broken down, he chooses to go and continue working on it and ask the king bravely for permission. The rest of the book is the first-person account of the troubles and hardship Nehemiah dealt with as he completed the work and reestablished the law in Jerusalem, which led to the worship of the God of Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac. So all this is happening, and Nehemiah is this guy. He's a leader. He's a great leader. I love the book of Nehemiah. Actually, I use it all the time because Nehemiah has so many aspects to him that shows us how we should lead. That shows me how I should lead, not just my family, not just in my career, but in church and everywhere else. And we should be leaders, and we should be people like Nehemiah, who was living at the king's table and asked for permission to go and live back in Jerusalem and start a construction project and rebuild a wall when he had everything he ever needed right where he was. He ate the king's food, he ate the king's drink, and he was in a pretty plush situation. He says, you know what? What is comfortable for me may not be best for my countrymen, right? And he goes to prayer for 4 months. Today, we're not diving deep into Nehemiah. This is the deepest that we're going to dive as I kind of give you the background. I just wanted to let you know what it is. But we will, I actually think doing a study in Nehemiah would be a lot of fun, but I'm not going to do that today. I've been praying and fasting, I told you guys, for a couple of months about this. Because I'm going to ask you guys to help with a need in our church. And as I think about the need in our churches, I've already mentioned it a couple of times. Like I've sent out videos, and maybe you watched it, maybe you didn't, but I was talking about the doors and things like that. But we have doors in our church on the outside, the glass doors and the windows above them. They're like, the bid is just under $70,000 to replace those doors. And we've been saving for a long time. In fact, as soon as I became the pastor, I asked our church board to join with me and set money aside for building repairs because I knew we were going to need it. So we started saving every month, and between that and the savings we already had, we found $50,000. So I want to say thank you to your church board and for your church leadership for thinking ahead, right? So we've saved $50,000, but we have a $70,000 need for doors. Not only that, but the roof that you see, if you drive up to the church and you see this short roof, it's only about 7 feet long, about 7 feet long, and it runs around most of the church. You can see it. And to fix that, I want to put metal on it because I'm tired of fixing roofs, and metal's kind of like once you're done. Like, we don't have to worry about it probably for another 100 years or more. So I want to put metal on it, and that's about another $30,000. That's with us installing it. So the church board and your staff is like, man, we got to clamp down and find every penny we can. We got to be as cheap as possible. We got several bids, but we're looking for $70,000 to fix the doors, $30,000 for the roof. That's $100,000. Your church has saved $50,000 toward this already. I asked your church board and staff a week ago, hey, will you guys give this week? And I want to be able to tell the church that your church board and staff is already taking the lead and saying we're gonna go ahead and give. And they've given $1,800 so far, $1,850 I think. That's in a week. That hasn't given them time to pray and fast though. And my whole point today is don't write a check today. You can, but it's what I want you to do is to think about it. I want you to pray about it. I want you to fast about it. I want you to be concerned with it. And right now, as I think about our church and I think about what's the big deal with these new doors, why is it worth $70,000 of God's money to fix doors? Well, because one thing, when we run air conditioning, there's a gap about this wide between the doors. And air conditioning goes out. And in the winter, cold comes in, right? So it costs us a lot of money to run the electricity. Secondly, if somebody that's really just wants to get into the church can just walk up, and I saw Matthew Miles, I don't know if you guys remember him, but he was a pastor here, big guy, but he just went up and grabbed a door and just went, boom, and he was just open it, like when it's locked. He was able to do that. It's dangerous. Sometimes people come and go in the church, and all of a sudden somebody walks in, and our churches are locked during the week, and all of a sudden somebody's in there. We're like, well, how'd you get in? Well, the door was just open, because if you don't do it just right, it just kind of rests and doesn't lock. We have a school downstairs with kids, and we don't want people just walking in our church. We also have a church secretary or office manager that comes to our church and works in the office oftentimes all by herself, and people just come and go. It's dangerous. Like, we want to protect our people, right? So we're looking to spend some money. I ask us for you guys to pray and fast about it. And I'm going to just pause that now. I'm going to kind of give a little bit more instruction on giving later, but forget about that for now. I want us to listen to the Word. And I want us to be able to just digest what the Word is without being, I don't want to get it mixed up with my ask, right? Because I think God does ask us to give and take care of our church and all of those kinds of things. And there's nothing wrong with me telling you about the needs of the church. But I don't want to get it mixed up with the Word of God. And I don't want it to get mixed up to where you guys feel like I'm trying to manipulate you to do something. I'm never trying to manipulate you to do anything. In fact, I asked you not to write a check today, but to pray and fast about it first. So I want you guys to pray and fast. I want you to be serious about it, and I'll talk more about it later, but let's get into the Word. So point 1, mourn, fast, and pray. And Nehemiah says in verse 4, he says, when I heard these things, I sat down and I wept for some time. I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. When was the last time that you heard news that brought you to the point of weeping? And when was the last time when you heard that, you didn't just get angry and start spouting off or going and telling people or going and trying to fix it, but instead you just stopped and you prayed and fasted? I think that's something that's probably lacking in our culture. Do you guys think that's lacking in our culture? Yeah, I think we're lacking that in our culture. I think that we should be people that actually pray and fast. And when something that hits us like a ton of bricks, we shouldn't just go, ugh, what can I do about it? And start getting angry and starting to go and tell everybody, how can we fix this? And I can't believe this is happening. But instead, stop and pray and fast and listen to the Lord. And I'll tell you, Nehemiah did it for 4 months before he acted. For 4 months, he prayed and he fasted before he acted. So I already said that Nehemiah was born in captivity, but still this idea of Jerusalem being broken down and the gates being burned up and the wall being knocked over just brought him to a point of weeping and crying. And I thought, why is it that this material thing would bring him to this weeping and crying, and why was it such a big deal? And I kind of did some research on that, and the condition of the city was a representation of the heart of God's people. So it wasn't just about the wall. It was the condition of Israel. See, the wall was a big deal to them. Is what it represented was power. It represented safety. It represented security. And as he's thinking about the stories that he's heard of his ancestors and the powerful things that they did and the great armies that they had running under King David and the different kings throughout history. And he thinks about all that. And he thinks about, man, we were such a powerful country, and now our city is in ruins. It's just a pile of bricks, and there's nothing left, and the people are brokenhearted. No one's even able to stand up and say, I'll build the wall. Nobody takes charge. Nobody does anything. They're just weak. And his heart is hurt. And as I think about that in our culture, And I think about how many things in our culture are broken down and destroyed. And there's so many people that could stand up and do something, but nobody does it. And it breaks my heart. Does it break your heart that the Christian culture is being mocked and destroyed and people are walking on it and just, it's like it's going out the window and it feels like nobody's even doing anything. And when I hear that, do I stand up and go, come on, guys, these guys suck, man. I hate this party. I hate that party. I hate this. I hate that. And I can't believe that president. And I can't believe this. Or do we sit down and do we cry and weep and then mourn? And then do we go ahead and pray and fast and ask God, what do you want me to do? And God, if you're asking me to do something, what is it you want me exactly to do, and how is it that I can do it? And God, would you show me favor, and would you show me how to do it, and what my next step is, and who it is I'm supposed to lead, and how it is we're supposed to get there? Because I know as soon as I stand up and start saying I'm going to do something, persecution's going to come, God. So will you prepare my heart? You guys, we need to be people, we need to be Christians who are willing to stand in the gap. We need to be Christians that don't hide and just cower and complain. I'm tired of cowering and complaining. We need to have a backbone. Do you have a backbone? Do you have a backbone that is just based on this word? Because we can have a backbone for a lot of things, but if it's not based on God's word, it's worthless. It means nothing. And guys, I want to call us as Christians to mourn for our country. And I want to call us as Christians to pray and to fast for our community, for our state, and for our country, and even for the missionaries around the world, that people can actually get a hold of God's word and it will begin to transform who they are. Because God's word will transform them. We were talking this morning in our staff meeting, and I brought up a scripture that talks about being, it was in 2 Timothy, and it talks about the people that aren't for God and seeing them actually as an opponent. And it isn't really Andrew actually reminded me, he kind of brought me into this idea that it's not really that we're looking at the people that aren't for God as opponents, but it's the evil, it's the principalities and things that rule this world that are in them that we need to come against. And we need to see it as more than just something that we go, oh, well, that's too bad, I'll pray for them. No, this is an opponent. Satan is an opponent. We should stand firm against him. And the way that we stand firm against him isn't by just talking about it, but it's by getting on our knees at the altars that are going to be in here or at your home and praying against everything that's going on that Satan's trying to do with this country and with this world. And we need to stand firm for Jesus Christ. I want to stand firm. Allow your hearts to be tender towards God. If we don't allow our hearts to be tender towards God, then we're just going to be haters. And that's what people say about people on the right side of the politics, and then there's people on the left side, and I don't care which side you're on. But what I'm going to say is, if people are calling us haters, either they don't know who we are, or we're haters. And if our hearts aren't tender towards God, and as all we're doing is spouting off about how we don't like this and don't like that, then we might be haters, guys. We need to be examples of Jesus Christ in everything we do, and that has nothing to do with hate. It has everything to do with love, and it has everything to do with the power of the Spirit living in us and through us so that we can make a difference in the world. So, guys, we don't want to be haters. I hate that term. Christians aren't haters. And I don't care if you're on the left or the right. If you're a Christian, you shouldn't be a hater. And you shouldn't hate the people on the right, and you shouldn't hate the people on the left, and you shouldn't hate the people in between, and we shouldn't hate the people that haven't come to Christ, but it should break our hearts. And then we should mourn and we should fast for them. You guys get that? Okay. Nehemiah has a hope that one day his people will be set free, and he wants a great kingdom to be protected by a mighty wall. He wants the people's hearts to be set free. As I think about walls, and I think about the walls that get built around people's lives, they build up these walls and their hearts get calloused, and that becomes the wall. And my prayer is that somehow we as people of God can be praying and fasting. Like, I can't pray for every single person in the world. I can, but I think that's probably diluted a little bit, but I need to pick people and go, I need to pray for that guy. So I'm going to start praying for this neighbor and this person over here. And those are the people I'm going to pray for. When I come to the altar in prayer, I come to Monday night and pray, and I come to Tuesday evening and pray, I'm going to be praying for these people, and I'm going to be praying that the kingdom of God would come into their life. Because the wall has to be broken down. And the wall that has got to be broken down is the wall that maybe they've built up over the years, or maybe it's because of the principalities of darkness have come into their life, and they've allowed that to become their focus instead of Christ. And we need to break it down. It needs to be destroyed. So Nehemiah has a hope that the people's hearts will be set free. The pride of the people is the wall, the military, and protection they have. In Nehemiah 1:3, it says, those who survived the exiles are back in the province, are in great trouble and disgrace. His people are in trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. How many people do you know that are in great trouble and disgrace right now? How many? Huh? How long do you have? Yeah. How long do I have? He says. There are more people. I hear so much. In fact, people have been saying to me, how are you doing? And I say I'm doing good. But just today I said to somebody, I said, well, the principalities of darkness are fighting. And I'm feeling the weight of it. And that's why I'm speaking the way I'm speaking today, because I'm feeling the weight of it and I'm tired of it. And I want us to stand up in prayer. I want to get on my knees, and I want to call my church, the church that God has given us. I want to call you to prayer. And I don't have some big prayer thing that I'm doing today. We're going to start some big thing and have a series on prayer. I'm just saying, you guys, we need to pray. Yes. Fast and pray. Take prayer seriously, realizing that that is your tool to defeat Satan. Because Christ is who's going to defeat Satan. It's not you. It's the power of God living in you that can do any damage. It's you on your own and your flesh arguing, complaining doesn't do anything but build up Satan. So I just want to call us to prayer today. This isn't kind of really what this message was supposed to look like, but God's good, and that's what I was praying for, that God would come in today. In chapter 2, verse 17, it says, you see, the trouble we are in Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. So is what Nehemiah is saying in that verse is that the people are in disgrace. Like, this is hard. Like, we are embarrassed, and we're not standing strong. We're not standing firm. We've been defeated. Our walls are gone. Our military's gone. We don't have any tanks. Guys, does that sound familiar? When I think about disgrace, sometimes I was talking to the missionary last week, and he was, oh man, it's just, I hate it. And this is good because it can go, it's not, there's political, but it's not political because I'm not picking a side. But he said that the people in other countries, I'll tell you what, it's like our government's a mockery. That's what he said. He said that they're laughing at our presidents in other countries. And I'm like, I'm disgraced by that. You know how we can affect that? Anybody have a guess? Prayer and fasting. That's how we can affect that. We can't affect it any other way. You know, is what he said. One person had said to him, they said, "Are you guys going to re-elect Trump?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know who's going to get re-elected." He goes, "Well, we hope Trump comes back because we like to watch him because we like to make fun of him." And he says, "This new guy, he's just boring. He doesn't do anything." It's a disgrace. It's not good. I think about what was going on with Nehemiah, and he says the people are disgraced. Have you fasted and prayed for our country? The wall at the border and the wall at Jerusalem may have many of the same purposes. You get that? See, our wall, I don't care whether we have a wall or don't have a wall, because what I care about is the hearts of the people. And if we can take the hearts of the people of America and we begin to love people rather than hate people, if we begin to pray for people rather than just talk about people, and if we begin to actually care about the people that are on the other side of the border rather than just worry about a wall or no wall. I'm not saying whether we should or shouldn't have walls. What I'm saying is, if we as a people of Christ can come together, then the love that we're going to have for people would far exceed the need. And I personally don't think we should open up the borders and just let people come pouring in. But guess what? There's been rules in place for years and years without a wall that kept that from happening. So whether we have a wall or don't have a wall, I don't care. But what I care about is that we have a heart to serve those people one way or another. And if we serve them with the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we serve them with the needs that God gives us and the resources God gives us to serve people, and we pray and we fast and God tells us what to do with it, then everybody will be taken care of. But I'll tell you one thing, if everybody in the world decides, "Oh, I got to get to America, there's food there," and they all come in here, then we're not going to have anything left to give. So it's this bad deal. And this wall that we're talking about here and the wall that we have in America, or the lack of a wall in either place, doesn't matter, because the true thing that he's talking about is the heart of the people, and whether they're disgraced or whether they're standing proud for who they are. And we're Christians, and we should not be ashamed of the gospel, but we should stand proud and say, "My God is bigger than anything that is coming against me." And by the power of God, we can overcome all obstacles. I want to stop worrying about every little thing and whether sex changes or no sex changes. And I want to stop worrying about all of that, and I want to pray to God that God would take control of this country and that the Word of God would become important to all people. I'm going to pray and fast for that. And I'm going to pray and fast specifically for my neighbor. I have one neighbor here who's actually getting a little bit more friendly. And I'm going to be praying for him. And I'm going to be going next door. And I'm going to be trying to share the gospel with them. I have another family that are really friendly, but they don't know Jesus. I'm going to pray for them. I have another neighbor that is a pastor at the church at Meadowbrook. And he's the pastor there. I'm going to pray for him that his church can grow and that they can share the gospel with people that live all around my neighborhood. I'm going to be praying and fasting for the lost people, because if I can pray and fast for the lost people, and you guys can pray for the lost people, God can do something big. Because you know what? In Nehemiah, God came and he took Nehemiah, one man who was a taster of food, and he sent him off to do this huge construction project, and they rebuilt this wall, and they had freedom from this tragedy that had happened to them. And they rebuilt the wall, and it brought pride back into their nation. Unfortunately, it didn't change their hearts. Because you can build a wall, but if it doesn't change your heart, then what good is it? You know, in Nehemiah and Ezra, both of those books end with kind of what was that about? Both of them do. There's not the wall got rebuilt, but the people are still not following God. Because we can do anything we want, but if we don't follow God, then we're still lost. Does that make sense? And we can believe whatever we want to believe. You can be on whatever political side you want to be on, but if your heart isn't for God, and it isn't owned by God, then you lose. We were just talking, I think it was in staff meeting again, or maybe it was something else. I don't know when it was, but you know who wins in the end? God wins in the end. It doesn't matter what happens now. And people right now look at us and they're like, oh, those Christians are kind of, they're falling away. There's less and less of them, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, we need to change that. We can change it by prayer and fasting, and God, just like He built the wall for Nehemiah, He can rebuild this nation into something for God. Because in the end, God is going to win. And we can either be winners or we can be losers. And there's only two choices. You can either be for God or against Him. You can either be with Him or against Him. And I choose to be with Him. What say you? I want to be for Him. I don't want to be against Him ever. I want to be for Him. Okay, I'm going to move on to point 2. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to read the prayer because I had the prayer in here. I'm going to read it. Nehemiah. I don't have it set in my I don't have a bookmark for it yet, so we'll see how good I am here. I found Nehemiah. No, I don't need glasses. Thanks, brother. Okay, Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 4. And then I'm in really 5, and I want you to hear this. When I heard these things, I sat down and I wept for some days. I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Then I said, and it said, oh man, it's already 11:45. I talked too much. He says, then I said. So here's what at first I thought, well, he prayed all this time and fasted, and then he started praying again. No, I think is what he's saying is, while he was praying and fasting, this is the kind of prayer and fasting that he did. He says, oh Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps His covenant of love with those who love Him and obey His commands. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you day and night. For your servant, the people of Israel. So he calls out to God. He asks for God to be attentive to his prayers. He says he's praying day and night. And he says this. He says, I confess the sins. And he says, here's a leader. He says, we Israelites. He doesn't say, I confess the sins that those Israelites are doing. He says, I confess these sins that we are doing. We Israelites, include myself and my father's house, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly. You guys, when we go to prayer and we go to fast, make sure you admit to God the things that you've done that are wicked. And then turn from them, repent. We have acted very wickedly towards you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses. Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. He's just reminding himself, he's reminding God of what he already promised. They're in the spot they're in because they chose to be in that spot that they're in. You guys, I think that America's in the spot it's in because it's chosen to be in the spot that it's in. We need to be, it's not too late though. Nehemiah felt the pain and he prayed and he fasted. And God gave him what he asked for. But if you return to me and obey my commands, that's some good news. Then even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. I think of Ezekiel chapter 36. When God's telling Ezekiel that he's telling Israel that I'm going to take your heart of stone and give you a new heart. He says, I'll take you from where you are in exile and I will rebuild you. I will take the stump of Israel and I will rebuild a nation. I will breathe life into the bones and refresh and bring an army out of nothing. Your power and your might has nothing to do with the power and might that God has. He can create anything out of nothing. He can breathe life into even your sad state today. I don't know what sad state you're in. I know what sad state I am in. I'm kind of brokenhearted right now. I feel like I've been beat up, and I don't know why. I can only say it's because Satan's trying to attack me. So you guys pray and fast for your pastor too. He needs it. His family needs it. Pray and fast for the Gideons. That Jesus' words would go out into the world, into 100 different translations, right? Is that what you said? 100. That's awesome. Praise the Lord. Okay, where was I? Remember the instructions you gave. I already read that. Okay. They are your servants and your people whom you redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand, O Lord. Let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Ooh, who's his ear going to be attentive to? These your servants and the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. You guys, we need to delight in the name of Jesus. We need to delight in the name of God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. I don't care whether you pray to Jesus or you pray to God because they're the same person, right? We need to delight in his name. He needs to be the one that we hang our hat on. He needs to be the one that we hang everything on. All of our desires, all of our concerns, all of our troubles, they need to be hung on the name of Jesus. And we need to pray for his power to come into our lives. Who delight in your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. That's the word. I was cupbearer to the king. Chapter 2, I'm out of time. So chapter 2 goes into Nehemiah talking to the king. And my next point too was we have courage and strength. We need to be a people of courage and strength. After we pray, after we seek God's counsel, we need to be courageous and we need to have strength. Courage means that you do something that you're afraid of. Like in the face of adversity, you do it anyway, right? That's what courage is. Guys, we need to be courageous people. I don't care whether you're a man or a woman or a youth in school. You need to be a courageous Christian. We need to look at adversity that's going on in our world. The tragedies that we see every day. Children being attacked by Satan. We need to look at that and we need to have courage and stand against it. We cannot ever be ashamed of the gospel. Because the gospel news of Jesus Christ is power. The gospel news of Jesus Christ is good news. We should not be afraid to share it. I should never be afraid to tell somebody, I have a life-saving message for you. You guys, I have a life-saving message for you. Jesus Christ died so that you can live. He took all the transgressions, all the things that you've done, like Nehemiah said, the evil things that have happened in your life, whether you were young or old, it doesn't matter, or yesterday or today, anything that you've done that goes against God, he took all of it and he brought it upon himself and he nailed it to a cross because the penalty of sin is death. And if the penalty of sin is death, and if we've sinned, then we're going to have to die. And Jesus said, I got this for you. That is some good news. I think that's good news. Okay, I'm going to close. I really wish that I wouldn't have talked too much. There was some other good stuff there, but God had something different, actually. I don't wish that. I think I spoke what God wanted me to say today. Worship team, are they coming up? They're coming up. Okay. So Nehemiah, what he does is he bravely asks this king for success. He asks the king for resources. He says, Mr. King, that can kill me just for looking sad today. He says, Mr. King, I would like to go back to my land. I'd like to rebuild the walls. And the king says, well, how long are you going to go? And he had an answer because he prayed about it. And he asked God, how long should I go? And God gave him an answer. And he had an answer for the king. And he says, okay, you can go. And he says, oh, wait, king, I know that I'm kind of pushing my luck here, but would you give me the money, the resources, the lumber, Would you give me protection? Would you give me letters to let me get there, help me get there? Will you provide for me everything I need? And the king says, yes, I will. I'll give you everything you need. And he sends him on his way. That's courageous. He's asking a king that really doesn't want to give him the time of day. It says a lot about who Nehemiah is. He's courageous, and he was such a servant of God. He was such a servant of God that the king noticed when he was sad. Would somebody notice that you're sad, or are you just always in that state? No, I'm serious. We serve a risen king who wants to give us everything. And I'm not talking about finances. I'm talking about he wants to give you his life. And he wants to give you life abundantly. And he's giving you a place in heaven where you get to reside forever. Isn't that good news? Okay, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I told you I'd come back to it. I'm going to ask you to pray and fast about what you can give toward that $50,000 ask. If everybody, I don't know how many people here. There's probably close to 200 people here today. If every person in this room gave $200, we'd have enough. If there's 125 people in here, if everybody gave $400 a piece, that'd be enough. You know, I just got a call yesterday of somebody that said, hey, I got some money that came in for my retirement. It's $5,000. Where do you want it to go? I haven't even asked yet. But I've been praying and fasting for 2 months. Nehemiah did it 4. I have somebody else in this congregation. I don't even know who it is, but I saw that somebody else gave $400 online the other day. I haven't even given the message yet. God's going to provide. I'm asking you guys to pray and fast about this. And I'm asking you to be bold like Nehemiah was and ask in places you wouldn't normally ask. You know what I did? I called Ryan Barker, who used to go to our church. He was saved here. I said, do you love our church? He said, yeah. I said, were you saved in our church? He goes, yeah. I go, are you willing to invest into it? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, Nehemiah asked the king for things that he shouldn't have asked the king for. I'm asking you, would you invest into our church? We need $50,000. And he said, if 200 people gave $200, then you'd have enough money. So I'll be the first. You guys, be bold. Go ask somebody that maybe you know used to go to this church and loves it. Be bold. Go and do a pop can drive. I don't care. Somebody else called me and said, hey, you know, if you take your doors when they take them off and you break the glass out of it, you could probably take all that aluminum and he's just a guy that does this kind of thing. He's like, they weigh this much a piece. You'd get somewhere between $500 and $1,000 for just the leftovers, the stuff you're going to throw away. He said, so if you got 2 men in your church that want to spend 2 hours, they could probably get $500 to $1,000. So if you don't have money and you want to do that, then do that. I'll save them for you. I'm going to go ahead and let you guys worship our King. How about that?